All right, this election carries a lot of weight for Americans, and for some, reproductive rights are among their top issues. With new conservative judge Amy Coney Barrett seated at the Supreme Court, some were concerned that Roe v. Wade could be in jeopardy. CBS News reporter Kate Smith joins me now. She's reported extensively on the issue of abortion rights. Kate, thanks very much for being with us. The candidates have vastly different positions when it comes to this issue. Remind us where they each stand.
Elaine, these candidates could not have more divergent views when it comes to reproductive health issues. We're talking abortion, birth control access, maternal health. It's impossible to overstate how different these candidates are. Let's do a little recap. Former Vice President Joe Biden, his big thing is he wants to repeal Hyde. That is the amendment passed by Congress in the 70s that prohibits any federal funding from going towards abortion. That means that Medicaid can't cover the procedure, nor any insurance programs provided by the government. He also would like to codify Roe v. Wade into law. Now, that's especially important as we're seeing at the court. Roe may not be as secure as it once was, but to be honest, much of his platform has to do with repealing many of the actions that the Trump administration has taken to reduce access to abortion. Some of those things have included repealing funding towards Planned Parenthood, getting rid of, or I should say expanding the different ways that employers cannot cover birth control on their plans. That's the birth control mandate from the ACA. And of course, Trump's biggest promise to voters when it comes to abortion are those Supreme Court judge picks. He's picked 3 so far in his term, and to give the court a solid 6-3 conservative majority. Now, what that means for people who, reproductive rights are their important election issue is that, Roe v. Wade is much less secure than it was when Trump was running in 2016. In 2016, it was more of a hypothetical that Roe v. Wade could be overturned. But as we are looking now in the courts, the cases that are coming through the court system, it is much more reality than it is hypothetical.
Well, the president and his supporters have tried to characterize him as the most anti-abortion president in U.S. history. What is the president's strategy? Why does it matter in this election?
That's exactly right. And, that is a title that Trump has embraced. He has multiple times called himself the most pro-life president in American history, and his track record shows that is true. Why that's so important to elections is that for the evangelical vote, being opposed to abortion is a great way to secure that vote. And we saw it in 2016 with his VP pick of Pence. Pence, of course, is a very strong anti-abortion rights activist, and it really solidified to voters that Trump was indeed going to make good on his promises to try to reduce abortion access, to try to overturn Roe, and it helped him in the 2016 election. Of course, he's made good on many of those promises. So going into 20, for voters who this is their issue, they feel very secure that indeed Trump is their candidate.
Well, how much of a factor are reproductive rights for voters? Is this a make or break issue?
So that's a really interesting point, and it's one that really breaks down on party lines. For Democrats, it's less of an issue than it is for Republicans. So a recent Pew study found that about 35% of Biden voters found abortion rights to be a very important issue. Now compare that to Trump voters. The number goes up to 46%. And when I was speaking to strategists, the way they describe it is that abortion is always forefront if abortion is your issue. The regulations, the bans, all the different court fights. But if you're a Democrat, often the things that energize that base are simply the bans. It is not the year-to-year, month-to-month battle. So you don't have that engagement that you do with the Republican side. And that is certainly something that we've seen the campaign take advantage of and do be quite successful on.
Well, regardless of the election outcome, could Roe v. Wade be overturned?
Again, that is such an important question, and the short answer is yes. Again, back in 2016, when Trump made these original campaign promises, overturning Roe was much more hypothetical than it was reality. But as we're seeing, it is, again, it's reality now, potentially, and it's imminent. This Friday, the Supreme Court will consider reviewing a case that would directly overturn Roe. And Elaine, if they don't take that one, there's more than a dozen cases in the pipeline. So again, this is one of those promises that he made back in 2016 that felt so impractical at the time, felt so pie in the sky. But as we're seeing, just 4 years later, it's very real, could happen.
Well, finally, 2 states put abortion on the ballot this election. What can you tell us about that?
That's right. So in a very literal sense, abortion is on the ballot in 2 different states, Louisiana and Colorado. In Louisiana, they're anticipating that post-Roe world. They asked voters to consider a constitutional amendment that would make it such that that no one would be able to find a right to abortion in the Louisiana Constitution. Now, when I was talking to one strategist, they said it's very unlikely that anyone would find a right to abortion in the Louisiana Constitution, but the idea is that in the event that Roe v. Wade is overturned, there would be no time in which that abortion rights groups could come in and try to make it such that the state would ban it. In Colorado, a much more simple, straightforward measure, a ballot measure that would ban abortion after 22 weeks of pregnancy. Important to note, Colorado is one of only 7 states that doesn't have a gestational limit. Why that's important is Colorado has become something of an abortion haven in the American West for patients who are seeking the procedure later in their pregnancy. And, we've spoken about this several times, but there are very, very limited legal circumstances in which a patient could do that. And those are, for severe fetal abnormalities, for women's health. So if, in fact, that ballot measure is successful, it would dramatically transform the way in which patients are able to access abortion, not just in Colorado, but really beyond the state borders.
All right, Kate Smith. Kate, thank you very much.